Hello, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson. I'm your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So lots of great stuff to go over with everybody today. The market is staying very consistent, and we're going to be starting out with our stats and everything for today. And when I'm telling you the stats, they're from Lake Orange, Osceola, Polk, and Seminole all together. And so that's kind of what we're starting with. When we're looking at the median price, it went from $392,490 to $395,000. So just went up a little bit. So that's pretty consistent over what it's been lately. The average sale price went from $469 to $481. So that's kind of where we're at when we're looking at that. When you're looking at the condos and the townhouses, the median price actually decreased a little bit from $305 to $299.9. And the average price was $316 to $306, so a lot closer to the median. Just in general, the overall long-term leases for single-family homes went from $2,300 to $2,305, and the long-term leases on condos and townhouses went from $2,100 to $1,950, for the week. So that's basically, what it comes down to, and all of that when we're looking at it. So single family homes, when you're looking at, there were a total of 745 that sold last week. So that's quite a good number where we're at in regards to that. Under 250, there were 52 of them. 82 between 250 and 300, 252 between 300 and 400, 146 between 400 and 500, 176 between 500 and a million, and 37 of them over a million. So when you're looking at then basically the days on the market, we're looking at 80. And the average price per square foot overall is at $225.98. Now, under 250, it's at 158, and over a million's at 400. So the average, when you're looking at it, those price ranges that are in between, they're right around 200 to 250 is kind of where it breaks down in regards to that. So if you're wondering where the median sale price is over the last few weeks and how it's kind of gone, is that it was in March 16th, it was at 390, March 23rd, 391, March 30th, 406, April 6th, 397, April 13th, 392, and now it's at 395. So it's just kind of staying very steady in regards to where we're at, and so that's always a good thing. So when you're looking at the condos, townhomes, and villas, there were a total of 135 of those that sold. 46 of them are under 250. 22 between 250 and 300, 43 between 300 and 400, 16 between 400 and 500, 8 between 500 and a million, and none of them over a million sold. There's 24 on the market, but none of them sold. So basically what we're looking at when it comes to that is that 79 days on the market. And there is quite a bit more inventory of that. This report that I'm getting now doesn't show me, and I've got to actually go in there and figure out how many months of inventory we've got. There's 3,087 properties on the market, and 135 of them sold. So basically, take that times 4, and I'm going to take it to 600, just because I know it's less than that. It's probably like 550, but say 600. Divided into 3,000, that's going to come out to being about 5 months of inventory, which isn't, terrible. That's considered a normal market. When you're looking at the single family homes at that 745, so we'll take 750 times 4 is going to give you roughly 3,000 into 9,200 on the market. And so that's showing us that we've got about 3 months of inventory if we stayed at the levels that we had last week in regards to the houses selling. So that's kind of what the scoop is on that when you're looking at it. So our market is very stable. And to me, that's a good thing. The interest rates have kind of gone up. They've kind of gone down. They're staying kind of where they're at. And basically it comes down to that's showing that there is stuff happening out there, that if you do want to buy a house, it's absolutely possible. And it just comes with finding the right house, the right situation, everything like that, that's going to make it a win-win situation for you and your family. And so I always go through the stats just to show you, really what the market is doing. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were saying, oh, the market is really falling. And I'm like, really? Where do you get that information from? And what are you looking at? And if you're just looking at one little thing of what happened this week, you can take statistics and kind of mold them in whatever way that you want to. And so these are just a weekly statistic that we look at, but looking at the trends and where they're going so that we're kind of ahead of the game when it comes down to it. This is usually, if you're a seller, a really good time to sell your house. We're getting into that point where we're in May, where school's going to get out at the end of the month. And that slows things down just a tad because people are busy with graduations and all of those kinds of things. So they're outside of their routine, but it really doesn't show up in the numbers of properties that sell. And then a lot of people do want to be in a new home by the time school starts, especially if they're changing school zones. And so this does happen to be a pretty busy time for people to be moving. And so if you're thinking about it, it might be a good time to do it. And you might say, well, the interest rate is too high. Well, with our lenders, we actually have some programs that what they will do is that they will give you a certificate that they will automatically refinance if the interest rates go down. Not automatic, but they aren't going to charge you the fees for doing that. So it's kind of a good deal. We always talk about that you want to marry the house and date the rate. And what that means is that the rate's going to go up and down. It's kind of temporary, but that house is going to be more permanent. And so what you want to do is find that particular house that's going to be a win-win situation for you. And then taking that to that next level is going to be a win-win situation for everybody all across the board. So when you're looking at it, that's what you really want to do, is that you want to find the particular home that it's going to be the best situation for you and your family. And usually you're doing that when you have some kind of a life event that maybe you want a lifestyle increase, which obviously could be, but if there's marriages involved, or if there's new children involved, or maybe you're downsizing, there's a multitude of reasons and things that people will do to actually want to be moving. And so whatever that is, we're definitely here to help. And there is properties that are coming on the market, all the time and all of that kind of stuff. So it's definitely, a good time to buy. It's been very stable for the last couple of years. Now we have gone up in the neighborhood of, 3 to 5% every year, even after the market took a huge jump and everybody said it was going to go down. It never went down. It just stayed pretty consistent. And so that's really, in my opinion, a good thing, because we didn't have that downward trend. I mean, the prices did go up after the pandemic, and prices tend to go up after any kind of tragedy for some reason, whether it's the pandemic or whether it's a hurricane or something like that. There's usually some kind of reason that things are going to happen like that. So we just want to make sure that you're set and that you're doing what you want to do in regards to making that housing decision the best one for you. And you're not out there alone. There's a lot of other people that are making changes and everything now, but you do have choices in order to, when you're buying a house. If you're looking in a certain price point, there is more than one house to look at, so you don't have to settle. And I think that's a great thing too. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So, we just came through tax season here a couple weeks ago. And so there are some possible tax advantages for homeowners in 2025. And so, your 2024 taxes are in the bag. And now it's time to start planning for 2025, possibly. And so costs like mortgage insurance and personal property taxes up to certain limits might be deducted to reduce tax bills, plus some home improvements in certain cases. So basically, it comes down to that you can deduct interest paid on up to $750,000 worth of your principal home on either on your first or your second residence. And those who are married and filing separately, the limit drops to $375,000. And the limits are higher if you bought the house before December of 17. And there's several criteria that your home loan has to meet in order to qualify. For example, you can't deduct any mortgage interest debt whose proceeds did not go towards the construction, purchase, or improvement of a home. So in other words, if you get a home equity line and it didn't go towards improvements on the home, then you might not be able to deduct that interest. But you can deduct it, if it was included in the purchase or you refinanced or something like that. So you're going to find a summary of your mortgage interest payments on Form 1098, and you obviously would want to be talking to your accountant to see what is what's the best way for you to go to that if you're going to do it. And so the benefits of the deduction go primarily to high-income taxpayers because high-income taxpayers tend to itemize more often, and the value of the deduction increases with the price of the home. And so for perspective, just 7.5% of taxpayers making under $200,000 itemized in 2020, why 45% of taxpayers making over $200,000 itemized, according to the Bipartisan Policy Center. So I think that's interesting. So they've made the standard deduction higher, and so maybe it doesn't make sense to itemize. But if you do have a new loan, many times it does get you over the percentages, so you just have to look at it. And then there are the state and local tax deductions. And when you itemize your tax returns, you can deduct the property taxes if you pay on your residence up to a limit. And so you can deduct up to $10,000 of the money that you spent on sales on state and local taxes, including property, income, and sales tax. So I know that, it's like when you're doing your taxes, if you're doing them on like one of the programs that walks you through everything and all of that kind of stuff, it asks you, did you make any purchases like cars, that you might have some big sales tax and that kind of thing to keep track of. So basically the people that take advantage of the state and local tax deductions have to choose between income and sales tax. You can't deduct them both. And fortunately, in Florida, we don't have income tax, so it would just be the sales tax. So that would be something that you could do as well. And now there wasn't a cap rate in the past, but now there's a maximum deduction of $10,000. How that cap is about to expire in the tax year of 2025. So I'm not sure what's happening with the taxes, if that's going to change again. And so depending on where you live, the property tax deduction can be valuable. Taxpayers with higher tax liabilities in areas with higher state and local tax rates tend to see the most significant benefits from those kinds of deductions. So some home improvements are deductible as well. You can't write off a new sofa that spruced up your living room, but some home improvements, so-called capital improvements, do have tax benefits. So according to the IRS, an improvement must add to the value of your home, prolong its useful life, or adapt it to its new uses. So I don't know for sure. You'd have to check with an accountant, but it sounds like a roof might be something that would, prolong the life of the home and that kind of stuff. And so you might need to, do that, might be able to do that. Again, you might have to check with your accountant. So certain capital improvements considered to be medical expenses can qualify for deductions as well. So like an entrance ramp or widening a doorway so a wheelchair can pass through, those things are deductible as home improvements that can be deducted as well. Other upgrades that make your home more accessible may qualify as well, like adding railings to a bathroom or installing modified smoke detectors for someone with hearing issues. And you might also be able to deduct upgrades to your home office if it's your main place of business. And generally, capital improvement expenses are depreciated over time, meaning the full cost of the change is divided by its useful life, and that's the amount you can deduct in a given year. So that would be kind of, if you did get a new roof and it's supposed to last 20 years, you would deduct it over 20 years. But repairs are changes like painting a room or fixing a leak, while improvements add to the home's value or prolong its life. Okay, home repairs are not the same thing, and they are not deductible. And then the other thing that is available are green energy upgrades that you might be eligible for a tax credit. And so unlike tax deductions, which reduce your taxable income and are based on your tax rate, tax credits directly reduce the taxes you owe and don't depend on your income. So say that you owe $5,000 in taxes, then that could be, you have $1,000 of credits, then that means you only owe $4,000 is what that is. So if you've installed new energy equipment to your home, like solar panels, you may be eligible for a residential clean energy credit. That credit is worth 30% of the cost of a new qualified clean energy property that's installed anytime from 2022 to 2032. The credit is non-refundable, which means the credit amount you receive can't exceed the amount you owe in tax. So, that's something obviously to keep in mind. And there's also the energy efficient home improvement credit, which covers upgrades that reduce home energy use. Improvements like insulation, central air conditioners, and exterior doors might qualify. It's a 30% credit up to $1,200 for changes made between 2023 and 2032. There's even a credit available for installing an EV charging equipment at your home. And the federal tax credit for EV chargers is with 30% of the cost of qualifying equipment up to $1,000 per charging point. So it just gives you a little bit of extra cushion there if you wanted to do that. If you've got an electric vehicle and put in your charger right there in your home, then there might be a value you get if you're at a high tax rate. And it's a tax credit. I mean, it's almost, if they're giving you 30%, that's almost like whatever it cost, that amount coming off if you were at a 30% interest or 30% tax rate. So anyway, just throwing it out there that you want to look at those things to see what you can do to help yourself. And I know that a lot of times solar panels and the way that all works, I'm not 100% clear on it, but with the people that I've talked to, that usually they do use that credit, and the vendors definitely do, in figuring out whether it's worth your time, energy, and effort to put the solar panels on in the first place. So it can definitely be a win-win situation for you in doing that. So the important thing, in my opinion, is that you just got to pay attention to what's going on out there, what's available, and what you want to do. And look at it from the standpoint of, this is going to help your home, but it's also going to help your tax bill and all of those kinds of good things. And you've got plenty of years to keep going on it until 2032. So you've got 7 more years that those tax credits and deductions are out there, and unless they change things in the meantime. But I think that they're kind of set in stone for some of those right now. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. And to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I wanted to talk a little bit about appraisals. There was an article that I recently read that said, how can two appraisers value the same property differently? And I can tell you that probably almost every time an appraiser goes out there, they can definitely do it differently. Now, maybe they're going to come close and maybe they're not. And so basically, when you're buying a house, that's one of the things that we have to deal with and work through, and all of that kind of stuff in order to do it. I was talking a few weeks ago about a house that sold in a neighborhood, and the houses are that exact house. There's like 4 of them that have sold in the 500s, like mid 500s is basically what they've sold for. And there was one of them that sold for $375, and so everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, it's like I want to buy one for $375." Well, who wouldn't, But when we looked into it further, it was actually people that knew each other. They were friends and coworkers and all of that kind of stuff, actually in a different state, and they sold it from one to the other, and that's what they did. Now, what the terms were and all of that kind of stuff, we don't know. It wasn't an off-market sale, obviously, but it was friends. Obviously, they all worked at the same company. They all knew each other. One was a president, the other one was a vice president. I mean, it was pretty easy to see that it wasn't an arm's length transaction. So, there is the opportunity that potentially, when the next property goes for sale, that an appraiser is going to pull that sale and go, oh, here's a sale and reduce the value of all the other properties in that area, which obviously is not fair and all of that kind of good stuff. So provided that would happen, then what we would do is that we would say, hey, this is not a good comparable or even a comparable, because if you look at it, this X, X, and X happened. And so those kinds of things happen. But there's more things that happen than that too, because the appraisers are looking at what they can, it's like they want to do it fair is what they want to do. But basically, there are differences of opinion. It's like, do they think that the market is going up or that the market is going down? Do they think that, the insides of this house are a lot better than the insides of a lot of other houses that are out there? And, it's not the appraiser that's buying the house, it's that buyer. But if you're getting a loan, you need to have the appraiser, in your that is going to go along with it, because they're working for the bank in essence. I mean, you as the buyer are paying for that appraisal, but the bank is going to insure a certain amount of the home for you, and so because they're giving you a certain amount of money, so they want to make sure that the value is there, so that if something would happen and they had to get that house back, that they had the right value on it. And so they're pretty strong on the appraisers, just wanting to make sure that it's right. And, I've spoken to many people and they're like, well, whatever the appraisal says, that's the value. And maybe it is, and maybe it's not. I mean, the value is ultimately what one person will sell it for and another person will buy it for. And if they can come up with the money outside of the appraisal, then, and they're going to do that, then that's a good thing for everybody involved, because the seller may not have sold it if it sold for less, and the buyer wouldn't have gotten it if it wasn't. And it depends on the market. Like in our market right now, it is very consistent. So if an appraiser says that the market is going down, they're going to give it a little bit less value, because the bank, again, wants to hedge their bets a little bit. So what we do is we talk to we can, again, dispute that. And like I went over the stats at the beginning of the beginning of the show, where I was showing that week after week, basically it's a very stable market that we're in here in Central Florida right now. So if it was more volatile, you could understand that, but it definitely isn't. And if you look over the last couple of years, ever since the interest rates have gone up, it has done that. It goes up a little bit, and then it goes back a little bit, up a little bit, back a little bit. But the overall trend is that it's still going up, not a lot, maybe 2 to 3% a year at the moment, but it's just kind of, the new normal, getting used to it. just like the new normal of getting used to the interest rates and the new normal of getting rid or getting used to, perhaps a higher price. If you look at the value that most people have on their homes, most people that bought their home prior to the pandemic and even prior to 2021, they have quite a bit of equity in their home because the market did go up quite significantly after that and has not come back down, and it doesn't look like it's going to and doesn't need to. We get a lot of people that say, hey, I'm paying cash, and so I should be able to get a lower price. And sometimes they do, but 25% of our market is cash. So if it's 27. So 27% of the market is cash. That's a big chunk of it. It's not like 2 or 3% that is out there that's going to get cash. And when you're looking at it from a seller's point of view, 9 times out of 10, guess what? When you buy that house from them, if you get a loan from the bank, they're going to get the same amount of money in their pocket that from the bank as they would if they had a cash buyer. So they might just have to wait a couple extra weeks. Sometimes there is more stress of it going up and down in regards to, the negotiation factor of it and all of those kinds of things that come down to it. But basically, the bottom line is that people want to see, that they're getting a good value for their home, and an appraiser might do it. Now, I was talking to a seller, and he was telling me that when he purchased a home here for cash, that he was told he couldn't get an appraisal. And I just want you to know that that is not true, that he could have gotten an appraisal. A lot of times when you're paying cash, you don't get an appraisal because you can kind of figure it out yourself because you have access to a lot of the same information that the appraisers do. So if you could just go through it and look at it, and say you're in a subdivision that the houses were built like 3 years ago, and they're all the same floor plan, and which is kind of these townhouses that I'm talking about. And so basically, it's like, that yours is not going to be that much difference. It's only 3 years old. And unless somebody really beat it up or something like that, they're all going to be pretty similar. A lot of people don't do a ton of renovations in the first couple of years. So basically what it comes down to is that, if there's other properties that sell, they are very common and very similar. And so it's going to be hard to justify that your house is worth $20,000 more, or $30,000 more, or whatever than the other houses that are selling. Now, there are circumstances out there, however, and different pockets of where houses are going down that they might not be going down in another area. And what I found that in is sometimes in, honestly, it's kind of the vacation home market is kind of what might be taking a little bit of a tumble right now. And it's just that there's more houses on the market than normal. Now, these are vacation home communities that are relatively new, that are just finished. And so what happens sometimes in new home communities, which is very interesting to me, is that if you look at it 2 or 3 years down the road, everybody kind of turns it over a lot of times in vacation home communities because they bought these houses and they thought, oh, this is what we're going to do. We're going to come down here. We're going to love it, all of that kind of stuff. And then it ends up that they don't exactly do that. And so then they say, okay, well, maybe I don't want to keep it or whatever. And so they switch it around. And so that's what we find happens more than not in those vacation home communities, is why they kind of switch it around. And then once it's switched around, people that come in there, they seem to be more stable, and then the market just kind of settles down and goes from there. So, when you're looking at communities and what's going on, I really like to analyze and see what's going on. Is there really a problem, or is it just that time of year that you're looking at? So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. To discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I found an interesting article that tells where people are moving to Florida from and where people are moving to after they leave Florida, if they do. So some of the key findings is that New York households move to Florida at more than double the rate of any other state. And then, so it was 51,967 households that moved from New York to Florida, and 18,948 moved from Florida to New York. So what happens sometimes is people move here and then they don't like it, and so they move back. So that's kind of what happened. So Florida netted the most households from New York at 33,019, and the average gross income for households moving in either direction was roughly 185,000. And Georgia is the most popular destination for Floridians leaving, while 24,383 Georgia households moved to Florida. Second only to New York, even more Floridians moved to Georgia, which was 26,876 households. That was the top destination for people who moved out of the Sunshine State. And then Florida captures wealth from New Jersey and California, where 24,011 Californian households moved into Florida with 187,025 adjusted gross income, compared to 23,128 from New Jersey with 228,205 average gross income. After accounting for households who left for these states, Florida's new transplants were second most from New Jersey and third most from California. And Illinois households moving to Florida are bringing the most money, ranking seventh overall with 17,728 homes. Moving into the Sunshine State, Illinois transplants brought an average of 231,364 adjusted gross income, and meanwhile only 7,973 Floridian households with an average a gross income of 102,996 moved to Illinois. Well, I moved here from Illinois, but that was a long time ago. So basically, so when you're looking at it, the states, like we said, number one was New York, number two is Georgia, 3 is California, 4 is New Jersey, 5 is Texas, 6 is Pennsylvania, 7 is Illinois, 8 is Virginia, 9 is North Carolina, and 10 is Ohio. So I always say it's usually people moving to Florida are usually east of the Mississippi. And obviously, you know, more the states that have big cities in them and stuff like that are also affected there. And then the top 10 places where Floridian houses are moving to, number 1 was Georgia. Number 2 is Texas. Then it's North Carolina, which I do hear a lot of people doing that. New York, California, Tennessee, which is another no-tax state, Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina. So basically, when you're looking at that, it really doesn't mean anything, you know, in the big scheme of things. But it does show that people do want to move to Florida. I mean, who wouldn't is always the way that I look at it. I mean, we've got great weather year round, and I know some people say, oh, I don't like the heat and the humidity and all that kind of good stuff. I personally do. I think it's awesome. You know, I go to Phoenix every once in a while, and when I go there, I always feel like my skin is crinkling because I can't wait to get back to the humidity where it feels so much better. But basically, the bottom line is that, you know, we love everybody to move to Florida as long as we've got the infrastructure and everything to handle it, and we're definitely working on it. I don't know if any of you have been on that new part of I-4 between Celebration and Champions Gate, or 27 actually. I think it goes all the way to there, where they just added that new lane about a week ago. I think it officially opened on Monday, but it was open over the weekend. And it definitely has made a huge impact in the traffic. And I know that they're looking to do more, and they're looking to do it north as well as south of the area to relieve some of that traffic pressure. And it does make all the difference in the world if you're not spending all the time on the road and everything like that. I think a lot of people moved to Polk County because they thought that the prices were cheaper, which they definitely were and are. But as a result of that, they kind of clogged the roads. And so now we're catching up with all of that. But progress is good. I always think, I remember reading a long time ago that there was a community that said, we do not want an exit off of the turnpike because we don't want, to have that kind of traffic and progress and all of that kind of good stuff. And what's I've watched that over that area in 20 years, and in the way that they said that they didn't want to do that, what's happened is that their side roads have gotten more and more crowded and they're less accessible, and it just kind of is wilting a little bit instead of growing. And you want every place to be thriving. I do anyway, in regards to, where I'm going. So you need to look at really what people are doing. I think Florida in general is a great place to be. Obviously, I choose to call it home, and I know all of you guys do, or a lot of you do. And if you don't, you should consider it and just give us a call. But, there's a lot of great things happening in real estate. We can find actually the right fit for you, whether it's a rental, whether it's a single family home or that you're going to buy, or a condo or whatever. There's a lot of opportunity out here for people to purchase and get exactly what you want. And that's what we're all about. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.